All right, Coast to Coast Combat Hour, the one after UFC 234. Ed Carbajal here with Matt Hawkins as always, and once again we're joined by Nolan King. What's up, fellas? How'd you like the fights this weekend?
It was all right. We had some surprises with the main event getting canceled 6 hours prior to the show tipping off, but turned out to be a fairly entertaining night of action.
How about you,
Yeah,
Nolan? What'd you think?
pretty much the same thing. I mean, on paper, the card going into the weekend wasn't one that necessarily stuck out to me as being, must see TV for casuals or must. I don't know. My interest wasn't necessarily there, but I feel
Yeah.
like after the final product, I'm pretty happy with it. I think it was a good value card in terms of I had no expectations, and obviously they were exceeded because of that.
What was reactions off of the Whitaker news? Obviously, it came for me. It came on a Saturday afternoon. I actually had just gotten out of training and showed up at my parents' house, and one of my training partners was the one that alerted me to the news. Obviously, I was in shock because it's the day of. Shocked, but not surprised. But how did you guys find out?
I heard from a relative, one of my normal messages, fight day, just everybody who follows the sport and especially is involved to going to fights and stuff, you're always checking the early morning news because unfortunately it's become pretty commonplace to have something go wrong. You always just hope it's not the big main event title fight. If the opening prelim gets canceled, then it doesn't really ruin your night. But when you see a championship fight that we've been looking forward to for shoot, it seems like 6-8 months now, coming off of the Ultimate Fighter, definitely made it disappointing.
Yeah, definitely. To lose a fight literally on the day that the fight is supposed to happen is one of those just absolute daggers. I mean, if this was a week out or if this was 10 days out, you could at least try to convince yourself that the UFC is going to scramble and find a replacement, even if it's a fight that doesn't necessarily make sense. You're looking to have a you feel wronged when a fighter falls out like that or a fight, even though it's obviously not the fighter's fault or anything, but at least when you get a little bit of notice, you can think maybe they'll do something to right the wrong. But apparently they couldn't get anybody, or excuse me, it was the day of the fight, so they obviously
Yeah.
couldn't get anybody. And yeah, it was disappointing, man. I was scrolling through Twitter and I saw it, and yeah, that was disappointing to see.
So the new main event, me and Matt kind of were going at it a little bit afterwards. The main event with Adesanya and Silva. I mean, I loved the fight. I thought it was great. I don't know if Matt, you've changed your mind since we spoke on Saturday, but I mean, Matt kind of disagreed with me. But they did get the Fight of the Night award, so I don't know. Why'd you come at me like that, Matt?
Oh no, I saw on Twitter you were really praising the fight, and I didn't see it that way. Um, First thing, obviously, I need to say is I'm a huge fan of both these fighters, and I think that might skew my opinion a little bit as far as Silva goes because I want to see the old Anderson Silva. I want to see the old Fedor fight. I want to see the old guy, and obviously, to me, he didn't look terrible, but to me, he came across as a sparring match. Uh, and I didn't feel like Silva in his mind thought he could A, win the fight, or B, didn't really care if he won the fight. It was more about just surviving. And
Mm.
I I, I don't hate on him necessarily for that. It's just not what I want to see. I would rather have him go out there and get knocked out. And I know that's not his opinion. He wants to have his brain cells and everything. But for me, dancing around, it's just to me that's what Anderson Silva's become over the last 5 or 6 years. Um, I mean, he won the Diaz fight, but that was another fight that was kind of similar to this, where it wasn't a lot of action. It's a lot of showboating. Um, it's video game moves, but those video game moves usually don't work as thrown as a single video game move. Usually there's a combination. I just saw a lot of single strikes being thrown. Um, it fell into the kind of the Pat Barry Crow Cop issue where you just had two guys who really respected each other. And I mentioned it the week before about us Adesanya. If he was going to lose this fight, I thought maybe it would be him kind of being starstruck and not really going for the kill. And in a sense, that's kind of what he did. He did end up winning the fight by unanimous decision, but he left the door open for Silva. I know one judge gave Silva the second round. Um, and the general perspective from the fans I picked up was that most thought it was really close to being basically 1-1 going into the third. And then the third round, Silva kind of lost me where he really didn't do a whole lot. I feel like Adesanya didn't want to go for the kill because he felt like he was fighting a legend, and I felt like Silva's just kind of mailed it in as far as being a successful fighter as far as wins and losses, and is more about just now making a paycheck and creating some highlight reels. But I don't know, it just didn't feel like a real fight to me. And throughout the history of MMA, we've had situations kind of where this has unfolded, and it just kind of fell into that category. It was a fight. I mean, I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. It wasn't so. I was a fight, because I kept waiting for that. Are we gonna? Is somebody gonna really go for it? Is somebody gonna go for the kill? And I just felt like they both held it back, and it was kind of more of a like a capoeira match almost, where it was just flashy stuff, but nobody really going for the devastating finish. And that's where I kind of found it disappointing. I mean, I felt like going in, Adesanya was going to KO him, and it was going to be violent and bad. And for Silva, obviously, like I said, this is a better finish for him, but just not as a fight fan. It wasn't what I wanted to see 100%.
Hey Nolan, I mean, I don't know. I'm so that's not really like disparaging the fight. I guess that, but I guess that's why you didn't see it as fight of the night worthy. But I mean, I didn't mention this to Nolan yet, so I'm just wondering his take of because we kind of had contrast. Matt and I had kind of contrasting. We went back and forth on Twitter messages about it. So what did you think when you saw the fight?
Well, Matt, you're a smart man, but I'm going to have to agree with Ed here. I think, I really enjoyed this fight. I thought, actually a lot of the points that Matt brought up, I completely agree with. But I was just captivated by it. I don't know if I was suckered in where, it did have this capoeira style that we don't usually see in fights. I mean, these are two guys that not only are very good, flashy offensive strikers, but they're guys that implement their head movement very well and are able. I feel like it played off of one another very well in that fight. There were a couple other good fights on the card. I felt like at the end of the night, this fight entertained me the most. Even taken away from the name recognition, I was like entranced by it. I don't know why, because I agree with Matt. There was some times that there wasn't a lot of action going on. Anderson Silva didn't really do much in the third round. I never necessarily felt like Israel was in any type of danger. I thought that the momentum started to shift in that second round towards Silva, where I started, anticipating a potential upset. That was somewhat exciting to experience during the fight. But yeah, I agree. I think that a lot of the things Matt brought up is totally accurate. In terms of the fight, reflecting on the fight as a whole, I will disagree with Matt on one point. I think that, in terms of Anderson, I really didn't have much interest outside of nostalgia to really see him fight again. I felt like even in the fights that, the Nick Diaz fight, the Bisping fight to a certain extent, the DC fight, the Brunson fight, I felt like even the ones that he won, that it was just progressively getting worse every time. It was just like, oh, like he kind of looks old, he looks out of shape. Like, I don't know, they're throwing him against guys that are in the top, 10 to 15 range, or, Nick Diaz, who's not even in the rankings, and he's not looking particularly great. I just was kind of, waiting for Israel to just kill him at the beginning of that fight. Anderson not having fought for, over almost, I think it was like 2 years or something, right? So yeah. I think Anderson's stock rose a little bit in my book. I mean, for him to come in and again, maybe this is just because I had such low expectations of what he was capable of now, but I feel like there are fights out there that I would be interested in seeing him fight, not just because he's Anderson Silva, but because I feel like, he could still compete in the top 10 in this division. So I was entertained by it. I could totally understand why, Matt, I think, has some fair criticisms of the whole thing. But overall, I thought it was a pretty entertaining bout.
Yeah, I mean, I was just as somebody like, I mean, you can read the guys, and they were reading each other so well. The way that they fought, the way it's almost like when I was thinking about it today and thinking about what we were going to talk about, mentioning it tonight. I don't know did you guys ever play? And if James Lynch watches this, he'll get a kick out of my analogy. But did you guys ever play the original Tomb Raider?
The PlayStation one?
Yeah. There's
long time ago.
Did you finish? Did you finish it? Did you go through it
No,
like?
no.
So towards the end of the game, there's a level where Lara Croft, like you have to beat a mirror image of yourself. So if you're controlling Lara Croft, and to do it, you can't really. You have to do things, but you can't just run through it. You have to pace yourself, or whatever. And to me, that's the first round. That's what I saw. I mean, you can see there's moments where Adesanya switches his hips to. You could tell he wants to throw a kick, but he also sees that Silva reads it. You know what I mean? I mean, and Silva's granted he's the more experienced, so so he caught things sooner. I don't know if you saw any of Adesanya's post-fight interviews, but he actually said, as much as he studied him and expected some things, the shots that he got hit with, he, even though he knew they were coming, Silva was still fast enough to catch him with the ones that landed that he was caught. Especially there was a double jab in the second round that he brought it up too was the one where he was the most threatened, and when he went on the retreat, he knew that knee was coming, which is why he just left. So he ran so far away, because that was the only way to avoid it. So I don't know. To me, it was just like two. He actually said it was two high level strikers when he talked to Luke Thomas. Two high level strikers. And I mean that's pretty much what you're gonna see when you see some two guys that know the angles and stuff that they work the way that they do, especially counter strikers like them. So I don't know. For me, it was great. After the first round, when the first round buzzed, I was impressed and I was all in and happy that I was watching a pay-per-view in Buffalo Wild Wings by myself like a bird. but
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a 5-round fight would have been maybe open the door for something a little bit. Maybe they would have worked each other out a little bit. Who knows if another 10 minutes would have ended in a finish for either one of them, or at least some real back and forth.
yeah.
Little brawling situations. And I know it's technical fight, so I don't mean brawl in that sense, but where they would kind of be some real quick back and forth, some strong counters and stuff. I don't know. And then perhaps I also fell a little bit into it being a number one contender fight, which was really kind of a joke out the gate.
Yeah, it's a little weird. Yeah.
So for me, I'm looking at Israel as kind of the next big thing, and maybe I fell. I mean, I think he's still could be that, but for me, he kind of, as Nolan said, Anderson Silva kind of went up a little bit because he survived and hung with one of the young kids.
Yeah.
But Israel kind of, to me, didn't really gain a whole lot of ground. To me, if he's going to be the champion in that division, that's a fight you need to go through and kind of leave no doubt.
Yeah, well,
and
I mean,
that might have been a little bit of frustration for me too.
Yeah, but I mean, again, it's a former champion and somebody that's fought a long time and has a lot of experience. So like I don't a decision win after he didn't finish him in the first round. If he was going to win, a decision win was what I thought it was going to be. I mean, especially after like Nolan said, you kind of forget you forgot about what Silva was capable of, and yeah, his stock raised a little bit. I wouldn't mind seeing like him and Weidman again, part three. I think that's worth doing. Something like that. Even I know he said he wanted the Nick Diaz fight. I mean, obviously that's just something to grab eyeballs. But I mean, also at 43, you don't want to see him get knocked out of his body too. You know what I mean? Like that. You don't want to see a 43-year-old man get knocked out. As a 43-year-old man, I don't want to see that. So
yeah, the Silva fight that I want to see is a fight I've wanted to see for about a decade now, and I want to see him fight Shogun. I think that would be a pretty cool fight. Maybe one to do in Brazil, and maybe it'll be a fight or two down the line, and it becomes kind of a retirement fight for almost either one of them. But the Weidman fight, I'd watch it, but to me, Chris pretty much handled his business in those two fights, and I don't really, I don't know if I give Anderson I don't know if he necessarily deserves a chance to get that fight back in my mind. So I don't know, but that was the main event. We're not going to go through the whole card. We have a lot to talk about, but
yeah, me and Nolan got a lot of heavy East Coast MMA weekend with what is it? It's Friday, Saturday. Yeah, Bellator 215, 216.
Yep.
So
back-to-back Krispy Kremes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
I thought I'd get that reference in early. Just slip it. I thought I'd beat Ed to the punch.
I actually forgot. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
So you guys have Bellator 215 on Friday night, 216 on Saturday night, and then I'll be in Phoenix for the ESPN one or the big ESPN debut with Cain Velasquez and Francisco Ngannou. But getting back to Friday night's action, it's kind of the warm-up card for the
Yeah.
big one on Saturday. But you really got a big heavyweight showdown with Matt Mitrione trying to bounce back from being just destroyed by the heavyweight champ now, Ryan Bader, and he fights Sergey Karatanov coming off a huge KO of Big Country Roy Nelson. Kind of an old school fight that, Mitrione's not necessarily an old school fighter, but this is kind of whenever Karatanov's involved fighting a UFC fighter, kind of is another one of those fights everybody kind of talked about wanting to see over the years. So I don't know. How do you see that, Ed? That's some heavy leather there.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's really heavy leather. So, the thing is, I mean, I feel like, well, so that's a hard one to call for me. I think I want to say Matt Mitrione's length and activity is probably an advantage for him, but I know, like you said, Karatanov can put him away, pretty easily, and I think he's got an edge in the grappling department. I don't know, man. That's why I like the card. I'm gonna say Mitrione just because of his reach, and I know he packs a really heavy punch.
What do you think?
I'm going to agree with Ed. I'm going to agree with Ed on this one. I think Mitrione's going to take it. I mean, Karatanov's looked good in his last couple of fights. I mean, I thought he turned back the clock against Roy Nelson, really. I thought he looked spectacular in that fight. I know Roy's not necessarily what he used to be, but still, I was expecting Roy to win that fight just being as durable as he is. But Karatanov, his striking looked on point. He pieced him up and got the finish. So clearly on a roll. I mean, it's been 6 fights now since his last loss. I think that he has this late career surge going on that we see in some heavyweights for some odd reason. With that being said, this is the heavyweight division, and every momentum seems to end fairly quickly with a screeching halt at times. And I think that that's what we're going to see here. I think Mitrione just, younger in the sport. I guess he's technically 2 years older than Karatanov.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think the wear and tear that Mitrione has is lesser. We still, we've seen him get submitted a couple times. Travis Brown busted him up, cut his eye with that when he got that hematoma. But other than that, he's been a tough guy to finish. And I think that if Karatanov wants to beat him, he'll probably have to get that finish. And I just don't see it happening. I think if we're betting on chins here, I think Mitrione's chin is a little bit better, and I expect him to finish Karatanov. I'll say in the second round.
Yeah. You talk about 6 fights since the Ayala fight, which was a 16-second KO loss to Javier Ayala at Bellator 163. That's his only loss since 2012. So we're looking at a guy who's 6+ years, almost 7 years now of with basically only 1 loss, and the loss being kind of a quick, just not really a fight, just a huge punch that ended it before the fight really started. For me, with Karatanov, historically, it's always been about how much he's into the fights, what kind of shape he's in, where he's at mentally. If you're like me and you kind of search out the streams to watch some of his Russian fights over the years, I know like his fight with Joey Beltran, he did win the fight, but he came in extremely heavy.
Mm-hmm.
He's had fights where he's really looked, closer to 300 pounds than probably the 245, 250 that he should be. So that's going to come down to probably seeing the weigh-ins. Obviously, he's not a big public figure, so we don't necessarily know how the training's going per se. But to me, if he comes in healthy and he comes in with any kind of game plan, especially seeing how straight up terrible Mitrione was on the ground with Ryan Bader, I think that Karatanov can really put a game plan together if he wants to and take the fight down to the ground. And I think from there, Karatanov eats him alive. With that said, again, it comes down to how if he's in shape. I agree with Nolan. If we're fighting or if we're having a battle of chins, I'm going with Mitrione. Karatanov's had some wars and worn it a few times. So I'm going to pick Karatanov. But again, I kind of see it as a coin flip. I just feel like he's the heavier puncher. So if it comes down to who hits who first, I think Karatanov wins. And I'm going to hope that he comes in with some kind of game plan other than just being in a firefight. And if that's the case, I think he's just the better overall fighter. So. And Fedor lost, and I need a Russian to win. So,
wow,
that's where I'm at.
that's a weird thing to need, but
well, I'm a fan of Russian MMA fighters going back to Igor Vovchanchin, and that's and Oleg Tiktarov. That's the lineage of fighters that I've always been a fan of, and Karatanov falls in that line.
That's true. He is from that era too. Hey, Nolan, I saw you put something up on Twitter just like an hour or so before we came on. Is it one of these cards that it affects with the mismatch that you had tweeted about?
Oh yeah, yeah. So Stephen Mowry, who's one of Bellator's top heavyweight prospects, the big tall guy, 6'8" or whatever. He was supposed to, I guess, his fight was added at the last second to Bellator 215 on Friday. He had posted something about fighting for Bellator maybe like 3 weeks ago, one of their promotional posters with his picture on it. But we didn't know who his opponent was going to be. So beginning of this week, it came out that he was going to fight the Ring of Combat champion, Ahmed Hefny, who's 1-1 in his pro career. He's fought two semi-reputable guys, and one he finished pretty quickly, and the other one he lost by decision. So I wasn't too thrilled with that matchmaking. I mean, being a Ring of Combat champion, that's a solid accolade to have, even though this guy's only 1-1. So I would tolerate it, but I guess push came to shove, and Hefny fell out, and Bellator was either looking for an opponent for Mowry, a replacement to fight him, or somebody to fight Tyrell Fortune, who's on the Saturday night card. I'm not sure which one, but I know Tony Lopez, Bellator had signed him to fight what he said on his Facebook, a 5-0 heavyweight, and they told him that they weren't going to allow him to fight because he had so many more fights than his opponent. And for me, I think that's an issue here because you got to look at skill levels and context in this whole thing. I mean, Tony Lopez is 45 years old. Like, I'm not kidding. He's actually 45.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. And he is 60-30. So I don't think you're ever going to find somebody that has that. You'd be very, very seldom would you find somebody that has the amount of fights that Tony Lopez has. So that's the first issue I had. The second issue I had is the fact that if you took experts of MMA, people that watch Bellator intensely, the regional scene, and you said, set a betting line for Tony Lopez versus Steve Mowry, I don't think that Tony Lopez would be the favorite. So for them to say they're not gonna sanction this fight on Mowry's behalf because it's not safe for him to fight somebody that's so experienced, or Fortune, whichever heavyweight it was, I just think you got to look at the context here a little bit, So instead, they're signing Mowry's going to face a guy that is 0-0 in his pro career, who has a solid, resume in terms of his amateur record. I think he's like 10-1 or something. Very into his level of opponents haven't been particularly great, even on the amateur scene. So they're going to do that instead, and I just feel like I think Stephen Mowry is going to be a huge favorite in that fight. Whereas if he fought Tony Lopez, I think it would be much closer of a fight on, in terms of the odds makers. So, I just don't see that just doesn't make any sense to me. I feel like that's kind of counterproductive. Now we're going to see some guy get, murdered by Stephen Mowry or Tyrell Fortune instead of, having a competitive test for Mowry or Fortune to, face a guy who's fought on every single regional scene you can imagine, from M1 to Alaska FC to I forget which some of the other ones he fought, Combate Americas, like way back. I don't know. I just thought that was kind of for commission, like the Mohegan Sun tribe, who always, they're the ones that are supposed to be, that the high standard of commissions. I just felt like that was, they dropped the ball. I know it's not a huge fight, and probably to a lot of people, it doesn't make a big difference. But to me, I don't understand the reasoning behind a move like that.
Yeah. I mean, for those that really don't know, Tony Lopez is kind of the king of the regional scene. I've seen him fight live probably 5 or 6 times. He was king of the cage, 2 or 3 division champion. They're light heavyweight, they're heavyweight. I think even their open weight champion at one point, Gladiator Challenge. Last year alone, he won like 4 belts in a month period between Alaska, Brave FC, and then a couple other ones. So the guy, he's competitive as hell. I think it's stupid that the reasoning they gave. If I'm the commission, I'm using my brain, and if I want to get, if I don't want to sanction that fight, I'm not going to use the amount of fights as a thing. I would simply say Tony Lopez fought a bare knuckle boxing match with Joey Beltran 2 weeks ago, and we're not going to sanction him to fight a 5-round bare knuckle fight. So you had an easy out if you're a commission that knows anything about the fighters you're trying to license or not license. So you could have easily swept that under the rug. The fight thing is really weird. Like you said, Mowry would have been likely still probably would have been a minus 300 favorite. I'm thinking
Sure.
at the bare minimum, maybe a 5 or
Right.
600. But Lopez would have definitely not folded. And it just, I don't know if you know, Ed, but Tony Lopez actually filed to fight at UFC 4, and Art Davie kicks himself to this day actually for not allowing him in, just because, you know, he's turned out to be a guy who's really been pretty competitive over the last 20 plus years now. But yeah, so he's been around forever. But it, you know, and the fight thing is, I guess, established then what the amount of fights that somebody can fight is. I mean, I know it's not the same, but how many fights has Paul Daly had? If we're counting boxing, kickboxing, and MMA, Paul Daly's up in the 70s probably too. I think MMA alone, he's probably close to 50 at this point. And what does MVP have? 13?
Something like that.
He's 13
so I mean,
and 0, yeah.
You know, when Fernando Gonzalez fought MVP, I think MVP had 8 fights and Fernando was approaching 30. You know, so it's not, you know, I know that one was in California, but it's just kind of a weird, just random thing to kind of throw out there. And, you know, I guess, you know, if you think it, you know, this isn't, you know, if you thought the guy was going to get squashed by Tony Lopez, that might be something different. But like you said,
Yeah.
it seems like a weird thing. And the out for me would have been, hey, 2 weeks ago he fought in bare knuckle boxing. We're not gonna get into that. He obviously took some brain trauma, getting punched by a 270-pound Joey Beltran for 5 rounds, and that's our out. We're not going to create some crazy rule that we're never going to hold. You know, if it was the big money bout of the night, they would have let that fight go through.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you need context, and I think you hit it on the head. You know, if they came out and said that, you know, this guy fights like 400 times a year, he's had 4 fights this year already, like, we're not going to sanction him. Totally cool with that. I think that makes sense when you're talking about fighter safety. But, you know, to say that you're erring on the side of caution for a guy, like you said, who would probably be a 4 or 5 to 1 favorite, is just kind of, it almost makes me feel like, A, you're disinterested to even look into these people that are fighting, or B, you just have rules that you don't have any justification for. So I know, again, like I said, it's not the end all be all of the weekend. I'm sure a lot of people aren't going to lose sleep because this fight's not going to happen. But I just thought it was an interesting talking point, you know, especially with a commission like the Mohegan Tribe, which is, you know, for the most part, very highly thought of. And Mike Mazzulli's the guy that, you know, Bellator brings out to sanction all of the events overseas. So yeah. I found it to be a kind of a different issue and something that was worth bringing up.
Yeah, and it's kind of a shame for Lopez real quick too, because he's had like almost 90 fights, and I know through his social media and stuff, he's always questioned why he's never been able to get into a UFC or a Bellator fight. He's never gotten to the top shelf organization. So that's definitely disappointment for him.
And the thing for people maybe that aren't familiar with him too is that, you know, he's a guy that even though he's 45 and he's had all these fights, he still wins. You know, he had a bunch of wins last year. He was on a pretty crazy win streak. You know, he'd won like 6 out of 7 or 6 in a row or something. So he's not some bum. He's still competitive. And, you know, he fought Satoshi Ishii overseas this year. And you know, he's a guy you could pretty much throw against anyone, and you know he's not going to, like, you know, get injured, beat up too badly or anything. He's going to give a competitive fight and be a good test. So, you know, hats off to him. Hopefully, you know, Bellator will come calling again for a fight, maybe you know, in a couple months, maybe in California, somewhere closer to where you're at, Matt. But yeah, it's just it's too bad all around.
That card also has a couple big names: Logan Storley, Mike Kimball, Austin Vanderford, Paige Van Zant's husband, and Eduardo Dantes. So, but really that's the kind of the appetizer for the big, huge show on Saturday night, which is headlined by Paul Daly, Michael Page, MVP. Quickly looking at it, so just to throw that out there, Michael Page is 13-0, and Paul Daly has 58 fights. So,
yeah,
I
would love to hear the argument there.
You know.
Should have had Paul Daly fight Tony Lopez.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if Paul Daly had 100 fights, they wouldn't allow him to fight Michael Page, you know.
I don't know.
You know, so, but anyways, so that's the headliner. But, you know, you kind of come up the card. The top 3 are really 3 big fights. The Roy Nelson fight now with Mirko Cro Cop was originally scheduled for Bellator 200 in London. Late cancellation. I can't recall exactly why. I think Mirko suffered an injury.
Yeah.
But we get to see that fight now. Mirko makes his Bellator debut, and man, could be a banger. What do you think, Ed?
I mean, this will be my first time watching Cro Cop fight live, so in that sense, I mean, I'm kind of jonesing as a fan, just to be there. I mean, I hate that the only media day I'm not making because I'll be traveling to Connecticut is the one that he's going to be at. But yeah, I mean, the I feel like both of these guys actually, it's a good matchup because both of them could. I feel like Crow Cop still has the power, obviously, to scare not only scare folks but put folks away. But Roy Nelson has got a chin on him. I mean, he had his tooth knocked out by uh, Derek Lewis at the event I was with when I met you in Vegas. So, um, you know what, man? I'm not even gonna try to call it. I just want to see it happen. I'm gonna leave it. I'm gonna leave it like that.
Yeah, I mean, again, heavyweights are tough, and when you start throwing in factors, you have two guys that have been around for so long. It's hard to tell, if they're going to hit a point where they finally break. We saw Nelson get knocked out against Karatanov. Crow Cops looked a little bit better. So just with the ups and downs of a late stage heavyweight, it's so hard to predict fights. I mean, I have enough trouble picking heavyweights that are in their prime. Never mind, heavyweights that are, legends that are in these legends fights that Bellator's putting on. That said, I have to say Mirko Cro Cop in these pictures I've seen of him recently looks absolutely humongous.
Yeah.
Terrifying, like TRT Mirko all over again. I feel like I have to go with him based on that, just because he looks so ridiculous. But we know that's not always the way things work in MMA. And Roy is, if you were going on looks and you bet on Roy Nelson's fights throughout his career, you'd probably have gotten a hell of a lot more wrong than right. So I'm going to go with Cro Cop, but I think Roy has a chance. I'm going to say Cro Cop gets I'm going to say a first round knockout. I'm saying whoever wins is going to end in the first round.
That's interesting. Just, I mean, just so that I'm not left, because I know I kind of left it with no answer, but my mind's still spinning a little bit. There is an edge for Nelson. Obviously, a lot of people forget that he's a submission guy. He competed in grappling. So I think if Nelson's smart and he gets him to the ground, he could probably submit Cro Cop. With all those muscles need a lot of air. You know what I mean? So Nelson could put his weight on him, wear him out, and get a tap out of him. But I mean, Cro Cop has had phenomenal takedown defense in his career, so it's really hard to call. But there's an edge for Nelson. There's an edge for Nelson on the ground if he can get him there.
Yeah, Cro Cop 9-0 in his last 9 fights, obviously, and obviously that's been in the Ryzen organization primarily. This is a rematch from UFC 137 where Roy Nelson actually beat Cro Cop. If I recall, he took him down, kind of held him down, side mounted him, and then ended up TKOing him in the 3rd round. That was after 2 other losses to Shab and Mir though for Cro Cop. So I feel like that was kind of when he had lost a lot of confidence where he was at. If Mirko fights at all like he has in the last 2 or 3 years, I think he's going to mop up Roy Nelson. I think his straight punches and his speed is going to be too much for Roy. Roy likes to really wing stuff, and I think he leaves that straight shot right down the pipe wide open, and that's kind of always been Cro Cop's strike. He's not one for winding up and really coming with a big haymaker. It's always a real laser right hand or left hand right up the middle, and I think that's probably what happens. I don't know if Roy at this time in his career has enough to be able to beat Cro Cop on the ground. I think he can win a decision on the ground. I don't think he can finish him. Kind of based off what I saw with Mitrione. I mean, I still think Cro Cop's probably better on the ground than Matt is, and Roy couldn't finish him down there. So I'm going to go with Cro Cop and call me a homer again for the Pride fighters and stuff. But I think Roy is I think Roy's one of those guys who's kind of come to the end of his career. And I think it's caught up with him. I think his strength and I think maybe he's a punch slower or a click slower on all of his punches. And when you've kind of turned your career into being primarily a big striker, once that goes, it goes. And I feel like that might be where we're at with Roy right now. So I'm going to take Cro Cop I'll take him by 2nd round knockout. I think he'll beat up Roy a little bit, hit him with a big punch. Roy will survive the 1st round, and then Cro Cop will hit him with the kick or a punch that'll turn his night down.
Did they let elbows go there, right? In the Mohegan Sun? I don't know why I forgot that. I remember there was a point that they didn't let elbows go there, but I think they do now.
Yeah,
Right?
Bellator,
Yeah.
we're good with elbows there now. So
Yeah.
that I don't really think too much of either of the guys really throwing a lot of
No,
elbows.
no, I'm
Other
just
than
thought because I remember when Crow Cop. I was thinking it because I know Crow Cop the whole thing when he transitioned from Pride to the UFC. One of the criticism was that he wasn't used to fighting in the cage, but then when he got that win back against Gonzaga,
there you go.
it was with elbows in the cage, and so that's why I asked about the elbows. I don't know why that just jumped in my head now, but that's why I asked. But with this is the other heavyweight to watch on this card is Vitaly Minikov's return. And he's fighting Czech Congo. I think this is going to be whoever wins this gets to fight Bader. No.
That makes sense. I think that's what it was kind of was promoted as initially when they brought back Minkoff. I'm trying to think if off the top of my head if anybody else really makes sense. I guess it kind of maybe depends what Bader does if he goes back down to light heavyweight for a fight. That might delay it and set something else up. But I mean, it should be the number one contender fight. This is another rematch from I think it was Minkoff's last fight in Bellator, and that might be wrong. But him and Congo had a really good back and forth fight where Minkoff gassed out pretty badly in about the third round, and Congo was kind of taking control of the fight towards the end, and ended up losing I think a 3 rounds to 2 decisions. So I don't know if Vitaly's kind of a lot of people see him as the future and stuff, but Congo's been on a hell of a roll too. So I'm kind of going to take a buy on that one. I want to go with Vitaly because he's undefeated. I think it's a cool story. I think whenever you have a heavyweight that's undefeated, it's kind of cool. And I'm not a big fan of Congo straight out the gate. But I think Minkoff, if he's, we'll find out. I think if he's the real deal right here. I think we know he's good, but I think this is the fight where he's fighting a real seasoned Congo who's at the top of his confidence right now. And I think depending on how this fight goes, could really tell us what road Minkoff's career is gonna go down.
But Nolan, I mean, how do you like these heavyweights?
I like this fight a lot. I mean, Congo his last couple, all of a sudden, pouring on the finishes here. We saw that in his last fight against Tim Johnson. Actually, I didn't see that fight, Ed. I don't know if you were in the media room for that, but they were trying to stagger the scrums so that we could catch the fights and then watch the fights. So we actually, or we could do the interviews and the fights, and we actually missed that one. I had to catch it. Actually, I missed the replay like so many times that I had to catch it. When I got back to the hotel.
That was in Long Island, right?
Yep, that was the one in Long Island.
Yeah.
It's all a blur at this point, but
yeah,
that was a wild weekend. But anyways, about the matchup, I think it's super exciting to finally see Vitaly Minkoff back in Bellator, back in the United States. This is a kind of an intriguing fight as they have fought once before. This is the rematch. Be interesting to see how both of them have evolved for better or worse. I think that Minkoff should take this fight. I think Congo's always a tough outing for anyone. He can make, fights really ugly if he has to. We've seen that. I've sat through many a Congo fights where he has not put on the prettiest performance, but it's been effective and he's gone out there and won. So that's the name of the game here. If Minkoff starts slanging and banging with him, I'm sure Congo's going to go back to that, type of style. That said, I just think Minkoff's so good, man. I just think he's, I know he hasn't been fighting necessarily the level of competition that the Congo has, but he's still been fighting really damn tough guys over there in Russia. So I'm going to go with Minkoff. I'm going to say that it does go the distance. I think I'll say it's 29-28. I think Congo, maybe third round, able to grab a hold of him, get him down, hold him a little bit. But I think Minikov's undefeated streak will continue, and he'll be next in line for Ryan Bader.
Yeah, I mean, and that whoever wins, if either guy wins that fight, that'd be a nice fight to see with Bader. But that Congo fight, if I remember right, the Long Island thing, I think that was a first round knockout. That's why it was so fast.
Yeah, it was like the first minute or something, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. So, this is I mean, just really quick. Well, the welterweight fight on 216. That's Eric Silva's Bellator debut against Yaroslav Amosov, a 20-0 undefeated welterweight. So that should be a good fight too. I feel like a lot of people are sleeping on that one.
Yeah, I mean, Eric Silva always brings it. I mean, people had such high expectations for him, and I get it. He didn't pan out. You know, you can justify calling him a bit of a bust. Clearly, I'm sure he would even agree that his UFC career didn't necessarily go the way that he had hoped. So that said, I think he always brings it. He's always in exciting fights. You know, somebody's going to go down. You know, he for what he lacks in skills, he at times makes up for in his heart. I mean, we saw the fight against Matt Brown. I don't know how many punches and kicks and knees he took and elbows in that fight, but he's a guy that comes to compete. He comes to put on a show, and Amasov is a perfect foil for him. I think 20-0 out of the Ukraine. Not a whole lot known about him. I know he looked really good in his last fight against Gerald Harris in his Bellator debut. You know, he also holds a win over Roberto Soldic, who's the KSW champion, who's a spectacular fighter, both in terms of entertainment value and in skill. So he's got some really legit wins, and I think this is both of them. Eric Silva can make a statement by taking out, being the one on somebody's 20-1 record, or you can have, Amasov, a guy that nobody really knows in the States outside of some hardcore Bellator fans and some hardcore international fans, have him come in and beat a name like Eric Silva in something that's probably going to be an exciting fight. So I think this is a killer fight. I think this could be the sleeper, like you said, the sleeper fight, and could, if they had fight of the night in Bellator, I think that this would be a good one to maybe put your money on if you were going for a prop bet there.
Yeah. I mean, we'll close off on Bellator, but the only thing is, we'll close off Bellator so we could talk about the ESPN card. But the one thing I wanted to mention was, and then since we have Matt, because I know you and I have watched a lot of the prelims straight through covering events here on the East Coast, and Matt sat in on a lot of Bellator events out in the West Coast. I feel like, a lot of the prelims I've watched from Bellator and watching UFC ones on Fight Pass, I feel like Bellator always has like super exciting preliminary fights. If I had to compare the two, I mean, am I wrong in that opinion? What do you guys think?
I think you're just getting. I think exciting fights can be made when you kind of have guys that aren't seasoned necessarily.
Yeah.
They're not, so the little, you get kind of the old UFC thing where it's kind of just a sloppy fight. So you get some of that. You get a lot of finishes because you get some mismatches too, based off depending on where the shows are at. So
just because Mike Kimball's finally on the, I'm noticing Mike Kimball's finally on one of the main cards here, and he was like a prelim guy that his finishes always made the broadcast filler. You know what I mean? So, I don't know. I just thought I'd throw that out there and see what you guys thought.
Yeah, no, I find them very, very different. You know what I mean? I think they're two different models. I think, the UFC, obviously, their talent that they have on their prelims can be upped. I think that, we've seen time and time again, fight of the nights go to the prelims. Conversely, Bellator seems to, have the model where they have a couple prelim fights for, guys on their actual roster, and then everybody else is, one-off contracts from the local scene or from, or the surrounding areas. And I think what Matt said too, like, sometimes when you don't have these guys that are so seasoned, it provides these moments of just like things that you couldn't even think of. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean, a little slip up in technique opens up for a spectacular finish that we wouldn't necessarily see in the UFC prelims. Even like, working for Flow Combat, when I first started to have to do live coverage for their events, write the results articles, I remember being like, oh man, I have to watch, pros that are only have a few fights or whatever. And I can't tell you how many times I sat there and was like, what the hell was that? Like, in a good way. I was just like, that was kind of awesome. So I think that two different models, and I think that you kind of got to judge them not necessarily with the same scale. So I think they both have their place in MMA. You know what I mean? If we didn't have the Bellator prelims, you wouldn't have the UFC prelims. So you need them both.
That makes you make a really good point that leads us into the UFC this weekend, because isn't Crone Gracie making his debut this weekend on the prelims for that?
Yeah, but we didn't. Real quick, I don't mean to cut you off, but we didn't do our daily page picks.
Oh yeah, I thought we did.
The big one.
Oh yeah, sorry.
We got the big one there. No, I don't mean to cut you off, but again,
no, thank you.
So
I think I figured out why you just skipped over that. I think this is in Ed's itinerary for the weekend. He has written down in between the co-main event and main event, sneak out for Krispy Kreme donuts. I think that's why he's trying to beat everybody else there. Pretend like he saw the main event.
They just sold me one in Jersey.
Yeah.
But go.
Anyways, Can't forget
Anyways,
about that.
so we got MVP. This is the welterweight Grand Prix. Winner of this fight faces off against Douglas Lima, coming off his win against Andrei Korshkov. I think this could be a really good fight, or it could be a really bad fight. I don't know if there's going to be much middle ground. If I were to really put a prediction out there, I would say Page uses his distance, kind of makes it a boring fight, a little bit kind of like the Gonzalez fight. And Paul Daly isn't as it gets ahead of himself more than Fernando did and tries to get aggressive. And I think he catches one later in the fight, being a 5-round fight. I can see the 4th, 5th round rolling around and Daly being extremely frustrated, trying to come in and create a brawl, Page kind of sidestepping and just clocking him. So, I mean, I'm a huge Paul Daly fan. He's one of my all-time favorite fighters to ever watch. And I would love to see him get the win here. But I think Page advancing is better for the welterweight tournament, and I think he's just the more polished fighter, and that's what I think is going to happen. I think Daly will get frustrated with when Page doesn't want to turn it into a street brawl, and I think he'll walk into something that'll put his lights out.
I think, could we see the second coming of Israel Adesanya versus Anderson Silva with this fight? Could MVP be making things pretty? Could Paul Daly be the one to throw one-strike combos? I don't necessarily think so. I just thought I'd throw that out there because I think, MVP, if we're talking about the two UFC headliners from last weekend, kind of has a similar thing, with the one-strike combos, the dancing around, the posing, the capoeira type style at times. So on paper, I mean, yeah, this could go one of two ways, and I think that there's really no middle ground here. I think we could either see, an exciting striking match where MVP is finally challenged. He's finally got somebody in his grill. He finally gets hit. See how he reacts to that. Or we could see something similar to when MVP fought Fernando Gonzalez, where the guy's pressing forward and MVP's putting on a Lyoto Machida impression, in terms of game planning, just, backpedaling, jabbing, hitting, landing a shot, circling out. Just really frustrating Daly. I think that was a good observation by Matt. The fact that this is a 5-round fight, I don't know if that makes this, if that plays into somebody's hand over somebody else. I'm not sure. I'm trying to remember, which one. I think obviously Daly's had his 5-round fights. I don't know if MVP did on the regional scene at all or anything, but, I think Daly might have a little bit of experience in that category. So, it's such a tough fight to call. I'm going to lean. I'm going to say MVP wins. I'm going to say it's a split decision, and I'm going to be negative Nolan here, and say that this fight goes the distance, and it frustrates some people to watch, including Paul Daly.
Yeah, I mean, I think he can. I agree with that. MVP can frustrate him by scurrying about the cage and running away to avoid engaging him in any type of back and forth or trades. But I mean, I think we have to remember that. I mean, Matt, you just pointed out the record, the experience between the two guys not a few minutes ago. So I think that's something that Daly's going to use to his advantage, and I could see him if he doesn't catch. I mean, well, MVP's very he's very slithery in there, so maybe he won't knock him out, but I could see MVP losing a decision because of running away so much. So that's where I'm leaning to. I'm leaning towards Daly winning, but maybe not with a finish, but definitely with by decision because of aggression and control, and not so much significant strikes, but just because of aggression and control.
Maybe we'll get a super twist and Daly will come shoot the takedown MVP, show that he has no ground game, and then John Fitch him for 5 rounds.
Hey, I mean, if he submits him, that'd be cool too. I wouldn't mind seeing a submission. You know me, I'm a jiu-jitsu guy. I love seeing a submission. I'm actually excited for the 215 the Dantes. I'm pretty sure we'll see some nice jiu-jitsu in that fight. But
and speaking of jiu-jitsu, before we move along, I just want to bring up, and hopefully I'm not boring people to death, but I want to bring up something kind of a little something that I have a little bit of insight into, similar to the Maori thing from the last card. On the prelims, we were talking about, you just mentioned in the Bellator prelims, you were mentioning jiu-jitsu. We have a fight: Vinicius De Jesus versus Rodolfo. What's his name? I'm trying to get up my Tapology page here. Rodolfo Barcelos. Vinicius De Jesus is an underrated fighter here in New England. Kind of slipped under the radar. The two guys that he's lost to in his career have crazy records. One of them was, Joaquin Buckley, who's in Bellator. The other one is Jefferson Negrini, who U.S. fans probably don't know, but he's 11-0 out of Brazil right now, a top tier lightweight down in South America. But the thing that's interesting about this fight is that he's fighting a guy with a 1-0 record. If we're talking about lopsided records, that's not where I'm going. Don't worry about that. But this guy is a third-degree black belt. He's only had one MMA fight, which was in 2018. I guess these two were scheduled on the amateur scene. But I want people to keep a close eye on this fight because I don't think it's a coincidence that De Jesus is matched up with a 1-0 black belt, welterweight fighter. I think that originally, from what I had heard, this was supposed to be Dylan Dennis's slot on this card. I heard that he was scheduled to fight in LA at the last card, at the Fedor versus Bader card. They knew that with the McGregor incident happening, they knew that probably wasn't going to happen. So they had then looked at putting him on this weekend on the 216 card, which happens to be this one. At the same time, they were also promoting De Jesus. They gave him an interview with MMA Junkie Radio, which I thought was or MMA Junkie, kind of unusual for a guy that's a one-off fighter for Bellator. Of course, what does he do? He calls out Dylan Dennis in the article. So you can check that article out. But I had heard that Dennis was in the works for that card. I had heard that De Jesus was in the works for that card. And I had one source telling me that those two, that there were at least discussions that those two were going to be matched up. I think the fact that he has this opponent now, which was not his original opponent from what I had heard as well.
You're talking about Barcelos.
Correct. Barcelos is a third-degree Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt with one fight experience. So I think that this is potential for Bellator to set this fight up again in the future. De Jesus didn't have to change his camp at all or anything. I can't say for sure that this is the case, but I did have somebody tell me that, and I think it's something that's worth at least mulling around in your head because I think it's a matchup we could see.
The article you said is where?
The article with De Jesus is on MMA Junkie. If you Google his name and Google News, he doesn't have a ton of big publications that have done interviews with him.
Yeah.
But again, like I said, I think that I wouldn't publish a report on this. I'm very careful with what I put out there, but I think this was a very strong rumor that I was hearing. I would classify it as a rumor, and I think that we have some other indications that this might have been accurate as well.
All right. Yeah, I made a note of it. That way I could read it on my train ride over there.
Yeah, there you go.
But all right, so I guess we could
now into Kron Gracie. We'll go jiu-jitsu to jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, Kron Gracie versus Alex Caceres, which I mean, come on. What again? I feel like that's I don't want to be disrespectful, but come on.
I think that Gracie might find out what it's like to get hit. We haven't really seen a whole lot of that in his previous fights, and Alex Caceres isn't going to go down there and just lay down for him. So I think that it's actually a pretty good first fight for Gracie.
Yeah.
An interesting number I heard. Great if the card holds as is, the Kron Gracie fight will be the 5,000th fight in UFC history. So kind of an interesting thing for a Gracie to be a part of that. On a personal note for me, it blows my mind that I've had a chance to see what I have. This will be my 50th live UFC event, and the Manny Bermudez Benito Lopez fight will be my 500th live UFC fight. So I mean, it blows my mind that I've had a chance to see what I have. But when I saw the 5,000 number, all of a sudden it dawned on me. There's a lot of fives and a lot of zeros flashing on a personal note for me. But the card really shaped up when I purchased tickets for this. I wasn't really sure what we were going to kind of be seeing. But the cancellation of UFC 233 opened the door for the Gracie Caceres fight. Also, I believe that Andrea Lee had a fight canceled too last minute. I can't remember what event it was for. Maybe the Argentina card. And now she's fighting Ashley Evans Smith, I'm sorry, which is also a pretty damn good women's flyweight bout. One that could put Andrea Lee really on the map if she can handle business there. And then the top part of the card. I mean, the Francisco Rivera, Aljamain Sterling is headlining the ESPN Plus prelims. That's a big one.
Jimmy Rivera.
I'm sorry, who'd I say? Francisco
You said
Rivera.
Francisco.
Yeah, no, I don't remember him.
Michael Chiesa.
Francisco Rivera. He was a UFC fighter. But yeah, that's a big one on your part of the map here is the two East Coast bantamweights.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, I got to sound off on that right away. Not for nothing. I mean, I know. I'll probably have to look over my shoulder here in Jersey, but I'm going for Sterling in that fight just because. I mean, come on. There's 6 degrees of separation because I roll with a Matt Serra black belt out here in Jersey, but Tiger Schulman's rolls deep out here in Jersey too. So like I said, but I'm going Sterling in that fight.
Well, you're a smart man, Ed, but I'm not agreeing with you on this one either. I got to go with Jimmy Rivera here. I think Sterling, his last couple of fights, he's looked great. I have to give him credit for that. I think that he could win this fight for sure, which was a concern for me because I guess him winning is not a concern for me, but I was concerned, prior to his last couple of fights that he was plateauing a little bit. I felt like even in his wins, we weren't seeing anything new from him. We were seeing the same thing. And then, he's had these couple of fights in a row where he's looked phenomenal. So I think this is a winnable fight for him. Rivera clearly needs to get back on track. I mean, I guess he won his last fight against John Dodson, but prior to that, he had got knocked up by Marias. Dodson fight wasn't phenomenal. It wasn't something that, threw him back in the title picture or anything. So I would like to see either one of these guys make a statement. The 135-pound division's clearing up a little bit with Marias beating Asuncao. Why not throw in another, throw your name into the hat, at least start inching towards that. So one of these, I think this is a phenomenal fight between two former CFFC champions. And I'm stoked to see it, man. I'm going to lean with Rivera by decision, but I think it will be close.
I think I picked against Sterling the last couple times, so I'm going to say I learned my lesson this time and say that he out-hustles Jimmy Rivera in some scrambles and is able to come out maybe a 29-28 decision. So I'm going to go with that. We talked about the Kron Gracie fight. The other top two, co-main in the main event, James Vick, Paul Felder. I think we could be in for a possible fight of the year candidate right here.
Yeah.
I've become a huge fan of Paul Felder, as most fans of MMA have, based off of his guts and his wins and his losses. And Vic, coming off of his just getting blasted by Justin Gaethje. So I'll be curious to see how although he did come back, didn't he get knocked out heavily by Beneil Dariush also put his lights out, so he rebounded from that one nicely. So it's not necessarily a case of a guy getting his first big KO loss and coming back, but I'm going to go with Felder. I think he's going to give up some size in this fight, but I think that he'll, again, kind of like Sterling, I think he'll out-hustle him. I think he'll be the aggressor, and I think that he'll win a decision. I think this will be one we'll be wishing was a 5-round fight when the final bell rings.
I'm going to go with Paul Felder in this fight, but I'm going to actually take him inside the distance. I think he's going to knock James Vick out. I just think that the style matchup isn't particularly great for Vick. I think, obviously, like you said, he has the height advantage. He's a big dude. But I think he hasn't always used that to his strengths. I mean, we saw that with the Gaethje fight. Like you said, the Dariush fight. Those were two pretty brutal knockouts. And I think that those two fighters have kind of, maybe given other fighters an idea of what you have to do against Vick. Be aggressive, not, let your hands go. I think that Felder is a really smart fighter. I mean, he's clearly a really tough dude after what we saw with his last fight with Mike Perry, fighting with the broken arm or hand or whatever it was. So I'm going to go with him. I'm going to say he gets it done. I'll give, I'm not going to say he's going to blow Vick out of the water or anything right off the bat, but I'm going to say second round knockout for Paul Felder.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all going for Paul Felder here. Only reason I think he can pull it off is because he's been doing a lot of commentary cage side, for a lot of fights, and there's something about when you're an active fighter, that you observe a lot of fights, you pick up things. I think it just makes you more cerebral when you have to do your own output. I mean, you see it with the guys that like Daniel Cormier calls fights and he fights and he wins, and there's a couple of other fighters out there that do the same thing. I mean, if he would. The best example was probably not the best example because he's always hurt, but like Dominic Cruz, I mean, look at how well he fights and how many fights he's watched and called. I think that just helps the mental aspect of the fight game, and I think that's the new edge that Felder has coming into a fight like this. So I'm going Felder too for that reason.
That brings us to the big main event, heavyweight showdown, return of
Mexico. No, sorry, that was my.
Tapology has a little American flag next to his name there, Ed. So you might have to take that up with Nolan. But Cain Velasquez returns, former king of the UFC heavyweight division, against Francis Ngannou, coming off of a big knockout win over Curtis Blades in China. Oh man, I think I probably know who you're going with, Ed. So why don't we start with Nolan?
I will say that Sherdog also has the American flag, so whatever happens here, we're in this together. But yeah, this is a tough fight to pick again. I mean, heavyweights, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Just seems like there's no rhyme or reason at times. Adding in Cain Velasquez's layoff here, it makes for a very confusing fight. I mean, even Francis Ngannou, there's a lot of questions. What kind of Francis Ngannou are we going to see? Are we going to see a Curtis Blades Francis Ngannou? We're going to see a Derek Lewis Francis Ngannou. I'm hoping we never see a Derek Lewis Francis Ngannou ever again, but I'm not ruling out the possibility. I'm going to go with Cain Velasquez in this fight. I feel like it's a bold pick on my part. But I thought, I saw some people talking about it on Twitter today that they thought he didn't look particularly great against Travis Brown. Kind of disagree with that. I thought that we saw a lot of new stuff out of him in that fight, even though he had a layoff. He was throwing wheel kicks with precision, things like that. So granted, it was against Travis Brown, but at the same time, I just got to go with him, man. I think Ngannou has shown mental lapses at times. I don't think that Cain Velasquez is one to, slip up in the fight IQ department. I think he's going to have a good game plan coming in. Hopefully he's healthy. Hopefully this extended period of time was just to make sure, all of his I's were dotted and T's were crossed in terms of healing up. I'm going to go with him. I'm going to say he gets it done by third. This is tough. I don't even know how. I'm going to say he gets it done by fourth round TKO. I think Ngannou will see him gas, and I think unlike the Stipe fight, I think we'll see Cain be able to take advantage of him a little bit more on the ground and land some big fight-ending shots, or maybe one of those sequences where it's just so repetitive and laying on top of the guy who's tired that the referee waves it off. So I'll say fourth round TKO, Cain Velasquez.
Yeah, I'll take it now, Ed, and then let you finish off with your prediction. But I feel like my brain's telling me Cain, my heart's telling me Ngannou. I just don't know where Cain's at, obviously physically. I'm not a huge Cain Velasquez fan, so just from a fan's perspective, he's not somebody I've usually rooted for. But I feel like a win for him is huge for the UFC. I think the UFC heavyweight division really needs him to come back and create the fights that could happen with Stipe and even Derek Lewis and Volkov. I just think there's a whole lot out there for Cain, fresh fights that will really help the UFC sell pay-per-views and just help the UFC's heavyweight division, help the UFC heavyweight division, worldwide. So I'm going to say Cain's going to win. I feel like we might know kind of early if he comes in for a takedown and Ngannou's able to fight it off. I think that could change, and we could see a situation where Francis puts a punch on Cain's chin. Cain's not somebody who's necessarily avoided strikes, so I think that Ngannou's not one you want to take one from. I know Ben Rothwell; those guys are Kongor guys, are big punchers, and they all put some leather on Cain, and Cain was able to take those. Ngannou kind of falls into the JDS category, where their first time Cain fought JDS really caught him kind of behind the ear, but really put him on it with a haymaker. I see Kane. If Kane's anything like we used to know, I see him coming in. I see him taking him down, and I'll say about a second round TKO on the ground. I think he's going to come in with. I think he's going to come in violent. If he's healthy, I think he's going to be a violent machine that's going to want to make a statement in his return.
Yeah.
So I'll take Kane. I'll take either. It's either going to be Ngannou in about 30-second knockout, or we're going to see Kane with a TKO sometime between the second and say the fourth round.
Well, that's I mean that's pretty much the way you can make it. You can make your choice if you're watching it happen. If Ngannou, the longer it goes for Ngannou, the less likely it is he's going to get any of these powerful knockouts that he's known for. And like I think Nolan just said, Kane's a smart fighter too. So the strategy you just laid out, Matt, that's the one that he should do. Take him down, make him fatigued, and then just either beat him into submission or submit him. You know. So, I mean, I'm not picking Kane just because of the Latino thing. I'm picking him because I think he's just smarter, a smarter fighter than Ngannou. Like Nolan said, the mental lapses. I think it has a lot to do with falling in love with your own hype and looking for that. Sometimes knockout guys look for knockouts so bad, if they don't get it, they start defeating themselves in the fight. So that's where that's the real reason I'm picking Kane. It has nothing to do that he's Mexican American like myself.
And I'll just throw this out there and stir the pot a little bit. There has, I'm not accusing him of being a user, but we haven't seen a whole lot of Kane since the heavy drug testing came into play. One of his, the Travis Brown fight was a first 1-round fight, but prior to that, people really questioned his gas tank against Fabricio Verdun, where he lost his title. Just again, one of those kind of storylines.
Sea level. What's wrong with you?
Well, sea level, picogram level.
Yeah.
Well, again, I'm not accusing him. He's never failed a test, so I don't want to go down that trap. But we don't necessarily know what his gas tank is in the testing era. Let's just say that. So it'd be kind of interesting to see maybe where he's at in the fourth, even fifth round, if Ngannou's able to survive and find out if he's gasping for air and who knows? I mean, both it could get real sloppy if that's the case, but I don't know. I just look forward to a great weekend of fights. There's also Invicta on Friday night, Legacy on Friday night. What do we got?
Christ.
We got a one fighting card on the Bleacher. Was it Bleacher Report streaming service on Saturday morning? Cage Warriors event on Saturday. Pancrase on Saturday night.
ACA.
Yeah, there you go. The
Oh yeah, and talking about CFFC, that's also on the 16th in Atlantic
Yikes.
City. So yeah, so it's like we ain't watching everything. So
no, there's gonna be a lot of action on though
yeah.
now. If a lot through Fight Pass, and then this and just to rethrow this out there, this card is on the regular ESPN, so nobody has to subscribe to ESPN Plus unless you want to watch the prelims. Otherwise, the main card, the final 6 fights of the night, will all be on Big ESPN and everybody's basic cable carrier. Let's hope, gentlemen, we're not talking in the near future about the fight that didn't happen this weekend. So let's just.
If we are, we will have to refer right back to this exact clip right here. We'll
yeah, I know. Well, yeah, I'll take the blame for all the fights getting canceled in MMA. But
good lord.
Yeah, somebody's gonna have to put me on a cross.
Matt's got a black belt on
that. Next scene, Tony Lopez is fighting Sergey Karatanov.
I think they actually fought. I think
really?
I think it'd be a rematch.
There you go. They both fought everyone.
But so yeah, a ton of action. Have fun out in Connecticut, gentlemen. Do a Krispy Kreme cheers for me, and why don't you throw out your handles and all your information there, Nolan?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on Twitter at MMA_Kings, on Instagram at Nolan King MMA. I'm trying to get that going. I'm also on Facebook. I have a like page where you can see my posts from all my different sites in one area. That is also at Nolan King MMA, or I guess you can just Google Facebook search Nolan King MMA. In terms of upcoming, stuff that I have in the works, I'll be putting out a number, I think 4 written articles, written interviews for this weekend's cards. I talked to Toby Misich, John Duma, Mike Kimball, and Justin Sumter. Then also I will be joining Jason Floyd, who is going to be at Mohegan Sun. I didn't know. I feel like we never get to see him at events. He does a great job with the MMA Report. I'll be doing his podcast, I believe, on Friday morning. Follow my coverage all weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I'll be like we talked about, Bellator 215, 216, weigh-in coverage, video interviews for Media Day. I'll be doing some stuff with some fighters who aren't on the card as well, doing some one-on-ones with them that I've set up. So stay tuned with that. My YouTube channel. Sorry, this is the longest plug I've ever had. You can subscribe to my new YouTube channel, which is pinned on my Twitter account. That's where all my videos will go for this weekend. And other than that, I'm looking forward to seeing you again, Ed, in person. I think we'll have a good time. We'll have to work hard, play hard. And then, Matt, it's always a pleasure, man. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. Fans can always follow us at Combat Hour on Twitter, myself at MMA Hawk 21 on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow Ed at Carbazol on Twitter and at Carbeerzol on Instagram. You can also follow Ed's videos and our podcast on YouTube at the Blogboard Jungle page. So until next time, gentlemen, good talk, and let's have a hell of a weekend of MMA.
Yes, sir.